Hey there, everyone. This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. And in this video, I want to share some music production tips and techniques while recreating Lana Del Rey's Radio. Now, this comes from a big request from all the subscribers on this channel, in which you wanted me to do something from Lana Del Rey's Born to Die album. So listening to the album, I thought Radio was a cool choice because there was something specific that I wanted to showcase about the drums and sound designing that I'm hearing on this song. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So here is the finished product. Now, when I listen to the album, as well as a lot of Lana's catalog, there's a lot of nuances that go into the sound design of the drums and really helps create the atmosphere and vibe. So I'm going to spend some time going over the drum programming and sound design so that you can also recreate and capture that same type of vibe in your productions as well. So let's start by focusing in on a drum rack here on Ableton Live. And I'm going to show you at the end of this video how you can access these sounds as well as this session, even if you're not using Ableton Live for your DAW. So let's go ahead and check out the basic pattern. Now, here is our foreground beat. Now, usually in paintings, you have a foreground and something in the background. And so it's a similar concept here. We're going to have a foreground beat, and then we're going to have a background layer to this that really helps bring the whole thing home. So here, we're just going to have a basic kick and snare pattern. The kick on the 1 and the snare on beat 3. Now, what I want to do is have a delay. So I've got an echo here right on the drum rack, meaning that it's going to affect all the sounds that we have on the drum rack. So I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to have the delay at every 8th note. And we're going to do not completely dry and wet, but we're going to have it around 37%. I'm just kind of tweaking this to taste. But most importantly, we want to make sure that the filter in this delay is turned on so that I can eliminate all the low ends, everything from 220 hertz below and a little bit of the high end. Why that number? Well, I just arrived there when I got it to taste that I like. So it's not an exact number that you need to reach, but more or less you want to eliminate some of the low ends and the high end of that delay. So now this is what we have. And we're using a stereo type of delay, not ping pong here, just a stereo type of delay. Now going back to our pattern, now what we want to do is layer a shaker hit with this kick drum hit as well. So let's go ahead and click the kick drum row. You notice the little dotted moving lines. That means everything in this key or for that note will be selected. Then hit the Option key and drag that up to the shaker. And we want the shaker to also hit when the snare hits as well. So we'll do the same thing. Hit the Option key and drag all the way up. And we want to place a shaker hit here as well. So the shaker is going to be happening at every beat, pretty much a quarter note value. So you could just fill in the gaps right here, and there you go. Now I'm also going to layer this big kick with another kick drum here. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing we did before. So hold Option and layer it right there. Now here's the reason why I did that. The big kick we have here, it's got a nice texture to it. It's got like almost like this warehousey type of reverb already printed on the kick. It's nice and big. This kick here, it's really it's dull and it's there's no other textures to it. But this has a nice low end presence, so I just want to layer the two by doing that. Now, having that delay there already changes the atmosphere completely. If we take the delay off, put it back on. So that's going to be good for now. Let's layer this pattern that we've just created with another layer here of drums. Now, a lot of times throughout this album, you can hear a lot of the nuances of a breakbeat loop or something like that. But yet we're going to be able to manipulate the breakbeat so that we can create our own pattern. So here we have the breakbeat probably used on this song here, Radio. And you notice that in those loops, there's the crackling, there's the swing, the feel, everything about that is really cool. So if I just clicked and dragged that into the session view, it's going to add that into our project. And if I just hit play, it's going to be in time. And then let's see how that sits with the drum pattern. Well, so much for being in time, right? So I'm going to right click here on the first warp marker and hit warp from here. And that will go ahead now warp it into this new tempo. That's cool, but what we want to do is now be able to use the sounds from this drum loop, but not necessarily the pattern. And so what we're going to do is just slice to MIDI. And we're going to right click right here on the actual loop itself and select slice to new MIDI track. And this is going to create a brand new MIDI track with individual slices. So it'll create a drum rack with this loop sliced up. But then we got to determine, how do we want this to slice up? Do we want to slice every quarter note, every eighth note, every 16th note, or maybe at every bar or transient or warp marker? So for this purpose, let's leave it at every quarter note. And then just leave the slicing preset the way it is, and then hit the OK button. And this is going to create a brand new drum rack with all the individual slices already sliced at every quarter note. And so now we can go ahead and program our own pattern, but using those sounds. So now let's go ahead, click and drag this foreground beat, the kick, snare, and the shaker that we created. And let's hit the tab button and drag and drop that into the arrangement window. That's how I can transfer clips both from the arrangement to session and session to arrangement. Now that I've got an 8-bar loop, I want to go ahead and record the slice drums here, the new drum rack that we just created. I'm going to just go ahead and record the kick and snare pattern in real time. So, and there's no difference as to why to record it in the arrangement or the session. I just want to do it here just to give you a change of scenery. So let's go ahead and record. Okay, and there's our pattern. So let me take the metronome off. And then what we're going to do is just, because I played this in real time, there's obviously going to be notes that are off the grid and not 100% on. So I just want to nudge them slightly. I'll select all by hitting Command A and then hitting Command U to go to my quantize settings. If you want to know where your quantize settings are currently at, hold Shift Command U, and then you could determine how the quantizing are going to apply. So I usually leave it about 46%. So that it's not stiff and robotic, and it kind of just does what I want to do. And if I wanted to get more quantizing, if I wanted to actually have it nudge more, I'll just hit the Command U again and again and again until it's in the right spot. So let's solo in on the slice pattern. Now you notice that when you're programming or you're creating a drum beat with slice drums, it can fall right back into the place of being too stiff. So what we got to do is bridge the gaps between one of these slices, the kick and this next kick. So I'm going to look for the hi-hat slice, which would be slice 2, and let's just place it right here so that it bridges the gap between this note and that note. Right? It's just a little ahead, so right there on beat 2. And see, that makes a bigger difference. So, and another one here, so that we can actually just bridge the gaps between these individual slices. And so we can go ahead and maybe copy this over. And we'll copy that like this. So it still feels like a loop, but it's created a whole new pattern. So then what I can do is just hit Command 2 to shape the grid and hit my B button to just draw in that note value there. So I'll just go ahead and do the same thing throughout the whole thing. So if I muted that hi-hat slice, we have, and then if I bring it back in, we have a more realistic loop with a different pattern. And we might want to draw in, I think when I listened to the reference, there's an extra kick drum here on that beat too. So that's the pattern I want to copy. I'm going to copy that and just duplicate that. And then take these two kicks out from there. And then let's go ahead and layer that now with our foreground beat. So we've got the main drum echo that here with the delay on it. And then we have this beat here. So we don't need the loop anymore. So I'm just going to delete that track. And here are the two drums together. Now we're going to accent the snare a little bit more and a little bit more over the top with a clap. I'm going to use a regular 808 clap for this. And we're just going to place that right here. And let's go ahead and place that throughout the pattern. So I'll just copy that much, hit the Command D to duplicate, and there we go. Now soloing this, what I want to do is, and here's the reason why I'm doing this. I want to have the clap accent, but not for the purpose of just layering a clap. I want to create more depth by having this clap have some reverb on there. And this is just going to create more atmosphere and depth to the drums and just feel, make them feel huge and just really fill up a lot of the room in the record. So here we have just a clap dry. And what I'm going to do is just drag this by holding the Option key down. That's going to create another audio track here. And what we're going to do is just pitch this first one down just a little bit. I just want to maybe just 3 semitones. And then layer it with this one here. And then what we can do is maybe just pitch this one down a little bit more. And we can just nudge this over just slightly a little bit. So it's got somewhat of a flam. And do the same thing over here and just copy that pattern. Now what we should do is let's group these two here. Well, I want clap 1 a little bit to the left, and then we're going to have clap 2 a little bit to the right, just to wind it up. And then group them by just holding Shift, highlighting both tracks, and hitting Command G. And that's going to group them. And let's just call these claps. And then on this track itself, let's go to our audio effects and let's go ahead and insert a reverb, meaning we're going to directly put a reverb on this. So click the reverb, stock reverb here in Ableton Live, and then drag and drop that right on top of the clap track. And let's just dial back. So that's a little too much decay time. So we'll bring that decay time back. And we want it dark. It's not, a lot of the reverbs that we hear in Lana's records aren't really bright reverbs. They're very warm and dark. So there's not a lot of high end present there. So we can use the input processing, or we can just go ahead and use an EQ to kind of shape the tone of the reverb. So that's what I'll do. I'll put an EQ. And maybe just extend the decay time just a little bit more. And I'm going to go from the global quality here. I'm going to go from eco to high. And then set the pre-delay a little bit more. Why am I setting the pre-delay a little bit more? I'm setting it so that there's a slight delay of the reverb. So we're going to get the dry clap a little bit ahead of the reverb. And now let's just see to taste, see what that sounds like with everything else. See if it makes sense. And then lower in the mix. So add some more space to the drums. I'm going to take the claps out. Put them back in. And that's really cool there. So I also have another reverb doing the same thing on my return track here. It's with a smaller bit of a room. And I'm going to send the dry drums that we have here, the slice drums, I'm going to send a little bit of that to that reverb. And it's all about creating space and dimension, because that's what you hear a lot on these Lana Del Rey records. It's just this big space and dimension. There's a lot of space with the reverbs, and it's just done really, really well. Now I went ahead and just added a crash cymbal just to accent the downbeat here, and that's what we have. And now what I'm going to do is just select all of these tracks together and group them. I'm going to have all of them together as the drums. So I'll just put drums. And what I'm going to use is a little bit of compression to just even glue them and just make them a little bit tighter so that they feel like one loop, actually. So use the glue compressor for this. We're going to put that, and I'm going to have the attack as slow as possible so that we keep a lot of the initial transients. And just a quick release. And I might just tamper with this by taste. So let's go ahead and lower the threshold. Take this off. I like getting it to a point where I feel like it's being sandwiched in good enough where it feels somewhat glued together. And you know, it's no reason why we're using the glue compressor, but yeah, it does kind of tighten them all up together and sandwich them together here. You can hear the difference when it comes on and off. And then I'll just give a little makeup gain. And this compressor is actually going to help the claps that we just created actually stand out a lot more, and the reverb on those claps just create a little bit more atmosphere, just breathe a lot more. Next, let's go ahead and focus on the strings. So for this, I'm going to use Kontact's Factory Library Orchestral Strings. It's just the regular stock strings that come with the Kontakt library. They'll do a great job getting close to what we hear on the record. So let's check out the actual chord progression and the pattern. So you want to make sure that when you're putting strings, that you're also spending some time focusing on the velocity changes as well. And that's going to help build some dynamics and make this feel a lot more organic than just drawing in the notes. So these were played, and I also wanted to make sure that I have a difference in a dynamic performance with my velocity. So you can see this one's a little bit higher, and then the second chord progression is a little bit lower in velocity. So we go stronger pressure, a little lower, and then this kind of creeps up a little bit. And then this is kind of like just a little bit more, but I'm accenting certain notes. I want this, this note to be a lot more in the velocity to kind of set up the beginning progression up again. So one thing to keep in note is velocity will go a long way, specifically with tweaking your string parts. And then we'll go ahead and use an EQ to just do a little bit of shaping here of the tone. Then I've got a reverb, a plate reverb by Universal Audio, an EMT plate reverb here set to the B setting. And I'm going to use this to run the strings too. And we'll just send a little bit of the strings to that. Well, a lot of the strings to that reverb. That's cool too. Let's duplicate the string track with the progression already on there. And let's get this progression and selecting all the notes and holding shift and the up arrow key. That's going to go ahead and shift all those notes an octave higher. So let me go ahead and play this. So we now have an octave higher and the regular strings. And so I just want to tuck them down a little bit, but they add a really nice texture to it as well. See what that feels like with the drums. Next, let's go ahead and put a bass line. Now this is just going to be a simple sine wave or a nice subby bass. So nothing too crazy here. We'll use a wavetable. You can follow along using any one or more oscillator synth in your DAW. And we're going to set the waveform to just a sine wave. And make sure that we go from polyphonic to monophonic so that we don't get any voices overlapping each other when we play the notes. So let's go ahead and listen to the bass pattern now. All right, now what we'll do is just a little bit of harmonic saturation. I'm gonna go to my audio effects plugin, use the amp, and then go ahead and use an EQ. And let's just go ahead and set the last bend here, just to take off some of the high end. That's the bass without the amp. So it just really helps the bass kind of stick through in the mix when you add some harmonic saturation to that. So let's play this with everything else. Next, we're going to add this cool vintage type guitar that we can clearly hear from being used from a Mellotron sample. And so I'm going to load up Contact once again and go to the factory library and locate the vintage folder. In that folder, you'll find a Mellotron folder. And Mellotron is just a remarkable instrument that was allowing you to trigger tapes. It was a piano that triggered tapes, then that had real recordings on there. So it was a really amazing concept, very much spotlighted in the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album. But enough about the history of that. Let's go ahead and choose the guitar patch, and that's what we're going to be using. So let's solo that. You can also locate the sounds that you hear at the very beginning of this song. I'm going to drag and drop the Contact by also visiting the Mellotron library and looking for the violins, and that's usually what you would get when you hear the opening part of this record is using the violin strings here. So, for instance, so those are just amazing sounding, and that's what you hear at the very beginning of the record. So we're focusing mostly on the chorus right now, and so I'm using this guitar riff here. But I'm going to be using the RC20 by Excellent Audio to add some distortion and some reverb here. So let's enable that. This is without it. So dry, it's a little bit more direct. So we want to create some more space and atmosphere. So I'm going to turn this on. That's where the reverb comes into play. There's a lot of reverb being used in these productions. And then just expand the width a little bit more and cut off some of that low, mid, and lows as well. So let's check what this sounds like with everybody else. And then last, you can hear a couple vocal samples delayed and sprinkled throughout the song. So I just used a vocal little shout sample. And I'm going to use an EQ to just shave off a lot of that low end rumble. And then place a echo or delay set to a quarter note value. And then let's add some dimension with inserting a reverb right after that. Making sure that I'm making the reverb warm as well, not too bright. So I'll use the input processing to take away some of the high end. And then a chorus to widen it up. Let's see what it sounds like with everything else. Well, I hope this video has been helpful for you. And as my gift to you for watching this video, I'd love to send you all the sounds and the session used in this video. as well as a sample pack that I've put together, including construction kits, loops, one shots, transition effects that is 100% royalty free that you can use in your DAW today. Now, I also want to pinpoint and show you how you can access these sounds even if you're not using Ableton Live. I want to still give you the ability to follow along, recreating this in the DAW that you're currently using. So once you've downloaded the zip file, by clicking the link in the description box below, you can then go ahead and look for that file and unzip it, and you'll see the Ableton Live sessions here, but you'll also see a folder labeled samples. So you want to open that folder and you want to view the imported samples. Those are all the samples that I've imported into the session. Process samples, such as the ones I've cropped, which would be the big kick and the big snare. And if I recorded anything in there, you would find them in there. But those, you can find all the samples located in there to use and to follow along. I hope this helps out. And once again, you can access this by clicking the link below in the description box or by visiting beatacademy.com/pack. Now be sure to subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date with upcoming videos, as well as when I do my random live Q&As in which I'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. So definitely want to say subscribe so you can be notified when that happens. Hit the little bell, do all that crazy stuff so you can stay informed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.